December 1944. While Allied commanders debated strategies in heated war rooms, one general was already repositioning three entire divisions through a blizzard to execute what military experts considered impossible.
The morning of December 16, 1944, began like any other along the Ardennes forest. American soldiers stationed in Belgium's densely wooded highlands believed they were in a quiet sector, a place where exhausted divisions rested and inexperienced units trained. The forest stretched across 75 miles of rolling hills, deep river valleys, and narrow roads covered in snow. Thick fog hung between the trees, reducing visibility to mere yards. Temperatures had dropped well below freezing, and soldiers huddled in their positions, trying to stay warm. At exactly 5:30 a.m., the silence shattered. Over 200,000 German troops launched what would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. 25 divisions, supported by nearly 1,000 tanks, crashed through American lines with devastating force. Adolf Hitler had planned this operation for months, assembling elite panzer divisions in complete secrecy east of the German border. The offensive aimed to split Allied forces, capture the vital Belgian port of Antwerp, and force the Western Allies into a negotiated peace, allowing Germany to concentrate all resources against the Soviet advance from the east. The surprise was total. American intelligence had failed to detect the massive German buildup. Most Allied commanders believed the Wehrmacht was too depleted to mount a major offensive. The Ardennes sector was defended by only 4 divisions of Major General Troy Middleton's 8th Corps, units either recovering from previous battles or newly arrived and untested. These forces were spread impossibly thin across difficult terrain, with minimal artillery support and limited reserves. Within hours, German armored columns punched through defensive positions. The 6th Panzer Army, commanded by SS General Sepp Dietrich, drove toward the Meuse River with orders to reach Antwerp within 4 days. To the south, General Hasso von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army advanced with similar speed. Radio communications broke down as American units found themselves surrounded or retreating in chaos. By nightfall on December 16, German forces had created a dangerous bulge in Allied lines, penetrating up to 12 miles in some sectors. The weather became Germany's greatest ally. Heavy overcast conditions grounded the Allied air forces, eliminating the overwhelming aerial superiority that had dominated the Western Front since D-Day. Without reconnaissance flights, Allied commanders struggled to determine the size and scope of the attack. Reports flooding into headquarters painted a confused picture of collapsing positions and German tanks appearing where they shouldn't be possible. At Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Forces, the mood shifted from confidence to concern. General Dwight Eisenhower, the Supreme Commander, received fragmented reports throughout December 16. By evening, the scale of the crisis became clear. This was not a localized counterattack, but a full-scale offensive involving multiple armies. The situation grew more dire by the hour. Critical road junctions became focal points of desperate fighting. The town of Bastogne, where 7 major roads converged, represented the key to the entire Ardennes road network. If the Germans captured Bastogne, their armored divisions would have clear routes to push west toward the Meuse River and beyond. Recognizing this, American commanders rushed reinforcements toward the town. The 101st Airborne Division received emergency orders on December 17 to deploy to Bastogne immediately. Paratroopers loaded into open trucks and traveled over 100 miles in freezing conditions, arriving just hours before German forces encircled the position.
While most Allied headquarters were made unaware of the impending German attack, one general had been watching and preparing. Lieutenant General George Patton commanded the U.S. Third Army, positioned south of the Ardennes in the Lorraine region. His forces were engaged in a grinding offensive toward the Saar industrial region of Germany, scheduled to intensify on December 19. Patton possessed a rare combination of aggressive tactical instinct and careful preparation. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he maintained an intense focus on intelligence reports. His chief intelligence officer, Colonel Oskar Koch, had been tracking unusual German movements since early November. Koch noticed something that other intelligence analysts dismissed: a growing silence in German radio communications opposite the Ardennes sector. In military operations, radio silence typically preceded major movements. Koch's reports documented the steady buildup of German divisions east of the Ardennes throughout November and December. He identified panzer formations withdrawing from other sectors, ammunition stockpiles being established, and fuel dumps positioned near the front lines. On November 25, Patton wrote in his diary that the First Army was making a terrible mistake by not reinforcing the Ardennes. Unlike other commanders, Patton had access to ultra-intelligence, the top-secret information obtained from breaking German codes. This intelligence confirmed Koch's assessment that something significant was developing. Most importantly, Patton acted on this information. In early December, well before the German attack began, he ordered his staff to develop contingency plans. These plans received simple code names: nickel, dime, and cent. Each outlined how the Third Army could disengage from its current offensive, pivot 90 degrees north, and counterattack into the southern flank of any German breakthrough in the Ardennes. Patton's chief of staff, Lieutenant General Hobart Gay, supervised detailed planning for routes, supply lines, and communications networks that would be needed for such a massive redeployment. This forward planning reflected Patton's unique military philosophy. He believed in maintaining offensive momentum at all times and had trained his staff to think multiple steps ahead. During his pre-war career, Patton had studied logistics extensively, understanding that modern mechanized warfare depended as much on supply chains as tactical skill. He established his massive Desert Training Center in California between 1942 and 1944, where over 1 million soldiers learned to operate in harsh conditions with limited resources. That training created a culture within the Third Army of improvisation, rapid movement, and aggressive action. On December 18th, 2 days after the German offensive began, Patton received a phone call from 12th Army Group Commander Lieutenant General Omar Bradley. The conversation was brief. Bradley ordered Patton to Luxembourg for an emergency meeting the following morning. Before departing, Patton held early morning conferences with his corps commanders. He ordered one corps to assume defensive positions, freeing up divisions for possible redeployment. He instructed his logistics staff to begin preparations for a major movement north. By the time Patton left for Verdun, the Third Army was already in motion. The meeting at Verdun on December 19th brought together the Allied High Command in a bunker beneath the city's ancient fortress. Eisenhower, Bradley, British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, and other senior officers gathered around maps showing the expanding German salient. The atmosphere was tense. German forces had advanced up to 50 miles in some sectors, creating a dangerous bulge that threatened to split American and British armies. Eisenhower opened the meeting by attempting to shift the perspective. Instead of viewing the situation as a disaster, he suggested treating it as an opportunity. The Germans had committed their remaining reserves to a narrow offensive. If the Allies could contain the breakthrough and strike the flanks, they could destroy these forces and eliminate Germany's ability to resist. But this required rapid action. Eisenhower turned to Patton and asked when the Third Army could attack northward. Patton's response shocked everyone present. He stated that he could attack on December 22, just 3 days away, with 3 full divisions. Several officers laughed, assuming Patton was exaggerating. The idea of disengaging multiple divisions from active combat, moving them over 100 miles through winter conditions, and launching a coordinated attack in 72 hours seemed impossible. But Patton was completely serious. He explained that his staff had already prepared contingency plans and that preliminary movements had begun. Eisenhower, concerned that Patton might attack prematurely with insufficient forces, specifically ordered him to wait until December 22 to ensure all 3 divisions would strike simultaneously with maximum impact. Patton agreed, left the meeting, and immediately telephoned his headquarters with the code words, "Play ball." The largest and fastest 90-degree turn of an entire army in military history had officially begun.
The task Patton faced was unprecedented in modern warfare. The Third Army needed to disengage from active combat operations, pivot 90 degrees, move over 100 miles north through one of the worst winters in 50 years, and launch a coordinated assault against a different enemy force, all within 72 hours. The complexity of this maneuver cannot be overstated. The numbers tell the story. Patton had to move 133,178 vehicles and tanks through icy roads filled with retreating American units moving in the opposite direction. 3 divisions would lead the assault: the 4th Armored Division, the 80th Infantry Division, and the 26th Infantry Division. Behind them, additional units would follow, expanding the counteroffensive. The total force eventually committed to this movement numbered over 60,000 soldiers with all their equipment, ammunition, fuel, food, and support vehicles. Roads presented the first major challenge. The Ardennes region had a limited road network, and those routes were already congested with American forces withdrawing from German attacks. Third Army units moving north would have to share these roads while maintaining organization and speed. Patton's transportation officers spent December 19 and 20 reconnoitering 2,800 miles of potential routes, identifying which roads could handle heavy tank traffic and which would require alternate paths. Weather conditions made everything worse. Temperatures remained well below freezing, with heavy snow continuing to fall. Ice covered the roads, making them treacherous for wheeled vehicles and difficult even for tracked tanks. Visibility was often reduced to a few hundred yards by fog and snow. Soldiers marched through conditions that would normally halt all military operations, yet the Third Army maintained its schedule. Communications posed another critical challenge. The Third Army's existing radio and telephone networks were oriented east toward the Saar region. Now, those systems needed to be reoriented 90 degrees north toward Luxembourg in Belgium. Engineers strung over 20,000 miles of new communication wire in just a few days, establishing field telephone networks that would allow Patton to coordinate with his advancing divisions. Radio frequencies were reassigned, code words were updated, and liaison officers were dispatched to ensure units could maintain contact during movement. Supply logistics required extraordinary coordination. The Third Army staff established dozens of new supply depots and ammunition dumps along the northern route. In just 5 days, they moved 63,000 tons of supplies, including an average of 4,500 tons of ammunition per day. Fuel trucks made continuous runs, ensuring that tanks and vehicles wouldn't run out of gasoline during the movement. The Third Army's logistics section, under Colonel Walter Mueller, had been trained to emphasize flexibility and rapid adaptation. That training now proved invaluable. Maps became a critical resource. The existing maps in Third Army possession covered the Saar region, not the Ardennes. The staff had to locate, print, and distribute entirely new map sets covering Luxembourg and Belgium. In total, 57 tons of maps were distributed to units before and during the movement. Every company commander, tank platoon leader, and artillery officer needed accurate maps to navigate unfamiliar terrain. By December 22, as promised, lead elements of Patton's 4th Armored Division engaged German forces south of Bastogne. The 80th and 26th Infantry Divisions followed closely behind, expanding the attack frontage to 20 miles. Despite the harsh conditions and complex logistics, the Third Army had executed the impossible. Units that had been fighting in the Saar 3 days earlier were now attacking in Belgium. The German reaction was one of surprise and concern. Wehrmacht commanders had assumed American forces were too disorganized by the initial breakthrough to mount an effective counterattack so quickly. The appearance of Patton's divisions on their southern flank forced German units to divert resources from the drive toward Antwerp. Panzer divisions that should have been pushing west were instead directed south to deal with this new threat. Bastogne had become the focal point of the entire battle.
The 101st Airborne Division, along with elements of other units trapped in the town, numbered approximately 18,000 soldiers. They were completely surrounded by December 21, with German forces controlling all roads leading in and out. The defenders established a perimeter around the town, using whatever defensive positions they could create in the frozen ground. On December 22, German commanders sent an ultimatum to the American defenders, demanding surrender and threatening annihilation if they refused. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st Airborne, provided a response that would become famous. When his staff asked what he should reply, McAuliffe reportedly said one word: nuts. This response was delivered to the German officers, who were genuinely confused by the American idiom until it was explained to them. The defenders of Bastogne would not surrender. Inside the perimeter, conditions deteriorated rapidly. Ammunition stocks dwindled as German attacks intensified. Medical supplies ran dangerously low, forcing surgeons to perform operations without adequate anesthesia. Food became scarce, with troops subsisting on minimal rations. The weather remained bitterly cold, and soldiers lacked proper winter gear. Frostbite became as dangerous as German shells. Patton's 4th Armored Division, commanded by Major General Hugh Gaffey, led the drive toward Bastogne. The division's route took them through several small Belgian villages held by German forces. Each position had to be cleared before the advance could continue. The fighting was intense and costly, with German defenders utilizing the terrain effectively to slow the American advance. By December 24, lead elements of the 4th Armored had pushed to within 4 miles of Bastogne, but those final miles proved the most difficult. German forces established strong defensive positions with anti-tank guns, mines, and prepared artillery fire zones. Each attempted breakthrough was met with fierce resistance. American tank crews fought in conditions that froze vehicle engines and made loading ammunition a painful ordeal. On the morning of December 26, elements of the 4th Armored Division's 37th Tank Battalion, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, achieved the breakthrough. At approximately 4:45 p.m., tanks from Company C entered Bastogne's perimeter, making contact with the 101st Airborne. The siege was broken. Supply columns immediately followed, bringing ammunition, medical supplies, and food to the exhausted garrison. The relief of Bastogne marked a turning point in the Battle of the Bulge. German forces continued to attack the town for several more days, but the arrival of Patton's forces eliminated any chance of capturing this critical road junction. Without Bastogne, German armored columns lacked the roads they needed to reach the Meuse River. The offensive had stalled. However, historians have noted that while the relief of Bastogne was symbolically important and boosted American morale, it was not the sole factor in defeating the German offensive. Units of the First Army on the northern shoulder of the Bulge had held their positions against overwhelming odds, preventing German access to key roads toward Antwerp. The 2nd Armored Division stopped German spearheads short of the Meuse River on December 24, and critically, the weather began to improve, allowing Allied air power to return to action. Beginning on December 23, clear skies enabled Allied aircraft to attack German supply columns, destroy fuel depots, and provide close air support to ground forces. Nevertheless, Patton's counteroffensive demonstrated what could be achieved through aggressive leadership and superior logistics. The Third Army's attack forced German commanders to redirect forces that should have been maintaining momentum toward Antwerp. Each German division pulled south to counter Patton was one less division available for the main offensive. The south flank of the German Bulge collapsed under sustained pressure from Third Army units, forcing a general withdrawal that began in early January.
The question remains, why was Patton able to execute this winter counteroffensive when other Allied commanders could not? The answer lies in multiple factors that made the Third Army and its commander unique. First, Patton's aggressive military philosophy permeated every level of his command. He constantly preached the importance of maintaining offensive action.
Unlike commanders who focused primarily on defensive positions and careful planning, Patton believed that speed and momentum could overcome superior enemy strength. This philosophy meant that his units were always prepared to move quickly, always thinking about the next objective rather than consolidating current positions. His famous quote captured this mindset: "A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan executed next week." Second, Patton's emphasis on logistics and staff training set the Third Army apart. Many generals focused primarily on tactical operations, leaving logistics to subordinate officers. Patton understood that modern mechanized warfare lived or died on supply chains. He had studied logistics extensively before the war and applied those lessons to train his staff. Colonel Walter Moreller, his G4 logistics officer, emphasized flexibility and improvisation. The Third Army's supply echelons were trained to rapidly exploit breakthroughs, establishing forward depots quickly and adapting to changing situations. This logistical competence made the 90-degree pivot possible. Third, Patton maintained exceptional intelligence operations under Colonel Oscar Koch. While other Allied intelligence sections missed the signs of German buildup in the Ardennes, Koch identified the threat weeks in advance. More importantly, Patton acted on that intelligence, ordering contingency plans prepared. This combination of accurate intelligence and proactive planning gave the Third Army a critical head start when the crisis erupted. Fourth, Patton's relationship with his subordinate commanders created an effective command structure. His corps and division commanders understood his expectations and were empowered to make decisions without constant consultation. Major General John Milliken's 3rd Corps, Major General Manton Eddy's 12th Corps, and Major General Hugh Gaffey's 4th Armored Division all executed complex movements with minimal direct supervision. This decentralized command structure allowed rapid adaptation to changing battlefield conditions. Fifth, the Third Army maintained higher states of operational readiness than other Allied formations. Units conducted regular training even during periods of active combat. Maintenance standards were strictly enforced, ensuring that tanks and vehicles remained operational. Ammunition stockpiles were kept at higher levels than regulations required. All these factors meant that when orders came to move north, the Third Army was ready to execute immediately. Finally, Patton's personal leadership style inspired extraordinary effort from his troops. He was known for visiting frontline units frequently, speaking directly with soldiers, and sharing their hardships. His speeches emphasized pride, courage, and the importance of each soldier's contribution. While controversial for his harsh discipline and occasional outbursts, Patton's soldiers generally respected him and were willing to attempt missions that other units might consider impossible. The impact of the Ardennes counteroffensive extended beyond the immediate tactical victory. Military planners studying the operation identified principles that influenced doctrine for decades. The importance of maintaining reserves capable of rapid redeployment became a key element of military planning. The value of accurate intelligence and contingency planning was reinforced. Most importantly, the demonstration that large mechanized formations could execute complex maneuvers in winter conditions expanded the understanding of what was operationally possible. The Battle of the Bulge as a whole lasted until January 25, 1945, when Allied forces restored the original front lines. German casualties exceeded 100,000 soldiers, along with hundreds of tanks and vehicles that could not be replaced. The offensive consumed Germany's last significant reserves, leaving Wehrmacht forces unable to resist the final Allied drive into Germany. Hitler's gamble had failed completely, hastening the end of the war in Europe. Patton's role in this victory solidified his reputation as one of World War II's most capable field commanders. His ability to turn a crisis into an opportunity, to move an entire army through impossible conditions, and to maintain aggressive action against a determined enemy demonstrated the principles of effective military leadership.
The winter counteroffensive in the Ardennes remains one of the most studied operations in military history, a testament to what can be achieved through preparation, aggressive leadership, and superior logistics. The winter of 1944 in the Ardennes forest tested American military capability at its highest levels. While many factors contributed to the Allied victory in the Battle of the Bulge, Patton's rapid counteroffensive demonstrated principles that remain relevant in modern military operations: the importance of intelligence, the value of contingency planning, the necessity of logistical competence, and the impact of aggressive leadership. Understanding these historical operations provides insight into how military forces respond to crisis situations and how preparation, even for unlikely scenarios, can prove decisive when circumstances change suddenly. The Third Army's 90-degree pivot remains an example of operational excellence achieved through planning, training, and execution under the most challenging conditions. What's your opinion on this historical operation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. For more in-depth documentaries exploring the strategies and decisions that shaped World War II, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications so you never miss new historical content.